So, a few words about today. From a theological and a humble human point of view, we can certainly say that God has brought us to this day, and in that I rejoice. I think it's also true that our continuing desire to be faithful disciples of Jesus Christ, participating in God's reconciling mission in an ever-changing world and ever-changing church, is what brings us here today. And I know that's what brings me here today. From a slightly more practical perspective, from a slightly more practical perspective, we are here because I invited us to be here. I invited us to be here at the end of a year-long consultation process in which we have been exploring the question, what is necessary in order to support and sustain a more vibrant and mission-oriented Episcopal Church in Vermont over the course of the next 5 to 10 years? Or stated another way, how will our diocesan structures and combined resources best support our common efforts to faithfully engage God's mission? So today is really about journey. Journey, a familiar and sacred biblical metaphor about which I remind us today. This day is about the next steps in the journey of the people of the Episcopal Church in Vermont. It is a journey marked this year by the 225th anniversary of the first convention of the Episcopal Church in Vermont, held in Arlington, long before we had a bishop of our own. 225 years. I find that a humbling and gratifying historical perspective to bear in mind. Today is important because the decisions and recommendations you will hear about come from shared discernment with the people of the Episcopal Church throughout Vermont. In 3 consultations that began during my sabbatical last summer, God's mission here in Vermont was being broken open for us. The suggestions were how best we might be about God's mission here in Vermont in the near future. Now, not necessarily the next 225 years, but maybe a smaller portion of that next history. So I spent time discussing, praying, considering all the information that was received with many of you in this room, including clergy days, the church hall meetings, meetings with committees, commissions, and boards. And all the fruit of that conversation has brought us to this day. The fruit of that discernment, including some of the decisions and next steps that we're taking, were shared with the members of Diocesan Council a couple of weeks ago, and with their input, I now bring all of this before us for our conversation today. Our journey is leading us to some changes in our common life as the Episcopal Church in Vermont. Some have begun, many will be implemented in 2016, others will continue to emerge over time. The journey is for all of us, as together we are the Episcopal Church in Vermont, and as together we express our common identity as that people of God. And so I look forward to that journey with you. And at the very heart of this journey, what I mean by the Missional Church can be summed up in 2 words. But those aren't the 2 words. And I didn't put those 2 words on there, but those 2 words we heard. No. Bear with me. Those 2 words, we're taping this and it's going out live too, so hi everyone out there in cyberspace. We appreciate it. The 2 words we actually heard in one of the presentations this morning. The 2 words that sum up what I mean by Missional Church are the words relationship and connections. Relationships and connections. The Missional Church, faithfully participating in God's dream of a compassionate, loving, just, and reconciled creation, is a church that is connected with the neighborhoods and communities beyond our church walls. The missional church, the church that is led by the Spirit into the world as the hands and feet and heart of God, God's incarnate life, is a church that is in relationship with its neighbors, the people who live in the communities of which we are a part and where God is already at work. In the testimony we heard today, as well as in other testimony that we could have in this room today. God's mission is very, very local. And together we are the Episcopal Church in Vermont in all those local settings where we worship and serve. And so, the number one and most significant theme emerging from our becoming more missional consultation process is that our church-wide partnership needs to do all it can to support local mission and ministry. And that is the principal topic of conversation for this first session today. The recommendation to focus our church-wide human and financial resources in support of local mission and the development of what we're calling local mission plans is the key to this goal. It is not necessarily a new focus, but it will mean developing new patterns of partnership with local faith communities where there is an eager willingness to pursue this more missional direction. Different communities of faith will need different things from this partnership, in part because of the variety of contexts in which local faith communities operate, and in part because some, quite frankly, are further down this road than others. In all circumstances, there is the need, I believe, to equip local leaders and to provide each of us with serious and engaging opportunities for formation and discernment as disciples of Jesus Christ. As people of faith, we need to know our story. We need to be immersed and nourished by word and sacrament through lively and sacred worship. And we need to deepen our understanding and practice of baptismal ministry and baptismal living in our daily lives. A task group from the Diocesan Council and beyond is already at work on this and would welcome additional support. Just yesterday, I was talking with the new interim dean at Episcopal Divinity School, who is very interested in supporting us in this formational effort. I believe we need well-equipped communities of faith who gather for life-giving support and collegial faith relationships. We need communities of committed Christians, people of faith who the members of these communities understand their part of their work to be this understanding of being sent into the neighborhoods and communities around them. But we need to send them confident of our own belovedness and open to discovering what God is already up to and joining with that. We need to be open and risk-taking communities of faith who will welcome those who come to us seeking God and a deeper knowledge of God, those who come to us with questions, with concerns, with hearts that are broken, with lives that are struggling. We need to be welcome. We need to be willing to take risks to meet those people where they are. We heard some stories about that today. And we need to be willing and vulnerable in our approach to all this mission. Our Stirrings of the Spirit initiative, now in its third year, has helped many of us understand the profound joy and grace in trying on new ways of being church, new ways of engaging God's mission, new opportunities to connect with what God is already up to in this world. The same can be said for those congregations who have participated in programs we have sponsored and supported with Partners for Sacred Spaces. Those who have places, I always want to say spaces instead of places, although I think sacred space is important too. Those of you who have been part of those programs understand some of what we're talking about how critical it is that we pay attention to what's going on in our local communities. and to use our buildings wisely. We've also seen results from those of you who have connected with the work of Tom Brackett from the Episcopal Church Center, and those of you who have connected with Living Stones. Equipping God's people for deeper participation in God's mission is the work of the church through its ministries of worship, formation, and community. Sending God's people to discover and participate in what God is up to in the world is the work of the church through its ministries of outreach, peacemaking, justice building, and prophetic witness. Witnessing to God's love in our daily lives is the ministry of all the baptized through our encounters with others at work, at school, at home, and in our communities. A missional church. That's the kind of loving community I want to be part of, and the kind of loving community I believe I am called to help lead. I hope that you don't leave this day without a deeper understanding and ability to communicate what we mean by being more missional. If you take nothing else away, remember those two words: relationships, connections. It is all about that. And in many ways, that's what our conversations at table will help us discover more deeply. So this is the number one priority direction growing out of the consultation. This afternoon we're going to talk about some more specifics, but if we are not grounded in this understanding of who we are as God's people and who we're being called to be and to what we're called to do, then all the other structures or systems or budgets or anything else will not have the context that is most needed. So I want to now invite you into table conversations with some prepared questions. These are the questions. What relationships with neighbors already exist in your congregation's life through which you might learn more about the surrounding community's struggles and dreams? What kinds of small experiments might your congregation be willing to try on? That's another word we want you to take home from today that will help you connect more deeply with your neighbors. And what tools, resources, and training might you need to conduct these experiments? Okay, so the question I have is, do you have a question that you need everyone in this room to hear? And or do you have a comment from your table discussion that you think everyone else in this room needs to hear? Susan does. Okay, so now this is the question here. I don't know what's going to happen when we do this other mic, when it's anywhere close to where I'm standing. So if this goes buzz, be out of the way. Okay, so turn that off.
Thing doesn't like it.
All right. Speak into the microphone.
Hello. Okay. So what came up in our conversation is especially that we need to build up more spiritual connection at the same time reducing some of the physical encumbrance of excess buildings. And I know that's hard to say, but that's what we talked about. And that a lot of what the church is doing has been kind of taken over by the community services, and so there's a bit of trying to figure out what that identity of the church is now and how do they fit into what's happening already in the neighborhood. But building of spiritual connection and learning online were two key features of this conversation.
Tweets are 140 characters long, okay? So, anybody else have one? Yeah. This is the only way I can do this so people can hear, so just... Okay, back here.
I had the privilege of being scribe for this table.
You can hold it.
Okay. And what we came up with, what are we doing? We're all doing food. Little congregations are doing a small food ministry. The big congregations are doing very extensive and varied food ministry, but that's what we had in common.
Thank you. Food. Anyone else had something? Yeah.
I too was described. What our group came up
hold it.
with, thank you, wonderful. What our group came up with is that, for the final question, and John had asked me to read this, that our parishes are doing mission, and what they want from the diocese is recognition that this mission is being accomplished.
Good. Anything else? Any questions? Any comments? Oh, okay, we're getting a little lively here. Oops.
Yeah, I'm always better at questions than answers. The two questions that strike me out of our table, one I think we've asked in our own congregation as well, are mission and outreach, missional and outreach the same thing? And a really helpful question for younger generations, what does community mean to the social media generation, and how do we support and respond to that?
Terrific questions. Nobody here has to answer that right now. But I'm not in control of this, so.
A lot of our conversation had to do with redefining church space, suggesting that experiment with redefining it as open space, as available space, as opposed to clubhouse. And there are lots of ways that we can do this. But the other thing that we kind of spend a lot of time talking about is how to actually be involved out in the community, not necessarily wearing the badge of the Episcopal Church, but just being the Episcopal Church in the other organizations and agencies in our towns and communities that are already doing fabulous things. And being a part of that without having to take it over.
Thanks, Bob.
One of the things we talked about was how incredibly grateful we've been at Christ Church Bethel for the inspiration and support that we've had from Angie and from Susan. And our question is how the heck we're going to get that connection from the diocese now.
That's a great question. I may say a word about that this afternoon, but I think the question will still remain.
We talked a little bit about joblessness, and that kind of led to a comment that was made somewhere today about being political. And we talked about the fact that Vermont seems to be a lot more a mom and pop kind of place, welcoming tourists. But if the tourists don't come, then there are no jobs. So incumbent upon all of us, if we want people to be able to have a job, maybe we all have to be a little more political about talking about what kind of businesses we want to have come to this state so that people can have the jobs they need. We're low on manufacturing, and that's where a lot of people need to have a job.
Thanks. Okay, so it sounds like, did you have one? We do. Oh, sorry.
So as we talked about relationship and connection and learning more about our surrounding community, we said that training about how to be in relationship would be helpful so that we don't go into our communities making assumptions about things that we don't know.
Okay, so great comments. I'm sure there's a lot of other tweets out there that you might want to send. We're going to take our lunch break now. So let's just sing our way to lunch, shall we? Okay. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise God, all creatures here below. Praise God above ye heavens. Oh.